We've heard 4 fascinating insights, I think. And Sandy, hello, good to see you.
Thanks. Hello, Sandy Dole. My question is, it's a really straightforward one. It's not about insights at all. It's just fact-seeking. Talked about prospects for inbound visitors this year. But what are the forecasts for 2015? How are you predicting that the year 2015 will finish up in terms of inbound visitors, numbers and spend?
Let's see if I can recall my forecasts. So the forecast for 2015 had spend up by 0.7% in the year, I believe. There were some months when it took a real hammering. So some of the summer months, spending was down. October was much, much better. So forecasting it to be just fractionally up, if anything, for the full year.
So 2015 might be kind of a flat...
Pretty much flat in terms of spending, yeah. In terms of visits, it's currently somewhere between 3 and 4% up, 3.5-ish, thereabouts.
Who were the biggest spenders?
So Britain's by far largest market in terms of spending is the United States, as big as the next two combined, which are France and Germany. Yeah.
Do you see that changing?
No. Their economy is doing okay. The dollar is very strong. We're hoping for a fairly good year from America.
And the strong pound against the euro?
There was a strong pound against the euro last year. It's eased off a little bit in the last few weeks. Fingers crossed it should be a little bit less of a burden this year. But yeah, there's no doubt last year had a bit of an effect.
And if there is a vote for Brexit, how will you play that?
Yeah,
Is that too far in the
future?
future?
Have too much of an opinion on such a sensitive topic. But I mean, the referendum hasn't been set yet. So I think in terms of trends for 2016, it's not likely to have that much of an effect. There's been some talk about uncertainty does hamper the economy, but that's more in terms of investment decisions. So it's probably that side of the economy that it would affect this year anyway.
Thank you. More questions, please.
Thanks. Thanks to all the speakers. It's Adam from Blue Sail. Question really, it kind of follows up on the Brexit one slightly, but I think VisitBritain, you've been tracking sort of perceptions of welcome over the years, and some of the good work done, say, around the Olympics and Rugby World Cup and various other major events have sort of, I think, moved that forward quite significantly. With all the focus on subjects, big political subjects, be that European or indeed immigration, how do you imagine that's going to affect, do you think there is an effect on welcome, regardless of the sort of the more practical aspects of exchange rates or anything else that might follow from some of that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So welcome is something that we track with a few pieces of research. We look at it on the GfK Nation Brand Index, which I'm sure a few of you will be familiar with. There is a question there asked about, if I visited, would the people make me feel welcome? It's typically something which we don't do terrible on, but not as strong as things like questions about historic heritage or contemporary culture or city life. It's in the last survey done in summer 2015, it did pick up a couple of places. So it's higher than it has been recently. Not a dramatic shift, but we've gone up a couple of ranks. There was some research done from CAA which found a good increase in perceptions of welcome as well. So some of the numbers do seem to be coming in the right direction. On the other hand, occasionally you hear our Berlin office manager, for example, says occasionally in focus groups it comes up, why are they so difficult in Europe? Why don't they like us very much? And possibly something like a Brexit might kind of have an effect there in terms of generally being a bit cheesed off about the kind of geopolitical attitude. But the most recent data has been going in the right direction for welcome.
Thank you. More questions?
Hi there, my name's Peter Rollins. Matt, I was interested in what you're talking about, wellness, and I was quite chuffed. I've just travelled up from Bath, and I think we came number 2 in the wellness destinations, just behind the Lake District, so I'll take that as not too bad, actually. A lot of the things I would concur with, because the whole terminology of wellness and well-being, I think it can be quite confusing sometimes, but for the last 2 years, in terms of growth, if anybody's been attending World Travel Market for the last 2 years, there have been actually 2-day work. There's been workshops either for 1 day or 2 days on the theme of wellness. The one thing that came out is that in Britain, we're just so fragmented compared to Germany, Czech Republic, Hungary, Italy, US, a lot of the Middle East, who've got actually a theme of wellness running through one of their niche markets. We're just, as a country, there's just no coordination at all. And like we're trying to resurrect some, working with a lot of the other spa towns, like whether it be Buxton, Cheltenham Spa, Royal Tunbridge Wells, but sometimes we do need just a wee bit of an overarching support for that as well. Just the final thing, like, we're lucky in Bath. We've got the natural thermal waters. I work at Thermae Bath Spa, and we've just opened a new hotel a few months ago called the Gainsborough Bath Spa, which is the only hotel in the country with natural thermal waters being pumped through to the spa facility. So we have got a benefit. But the one thing in the research that we've done, our customer surveys, is that is only one reason why they come to Bath. It's certainly a significant factor to use and enjoy the spa facilities, but we're working now with the National Trust on how they develop a lot of their walks going out from Bath. We're working with anything from Bath Racecourse, the Theatre Royal, the festivals, because when you look at what makes up a spa destination, the spa's only one element of it. So I think there's potential for lots of destinations in this country, whether even if they haven't got the spa facilities that we have, but they have got all the other things which make people just relax and enjoy themselves.
Yeah, I think this is the problem you find. Everyone is like stuck in their own little silos, and whether it's through either the local bids or the DMOs, there does need to be, in the work that we've done, it's actually trying to get a local surf club, like, as you said, linked up with the National Trust. They're doing their coastal walk development and their cycle paths. All these type of initiatives need to be joined up together and presented. And it's one of those things. There's people don't, you can't sit in a spa all day. That's the bottom line of it. If you go to Gambia to a yoga retreat, you do half an hour yoga in the morning and about an hour in the evening. In the meantime, you're at leisure, so you need to fill that time. And basically, I think that's. If you look at, as I alluded to, kind of like the Tyrol and Rotorua, but there's also, I think, particularly in the continental Europe, there is this almost like a stronger tradition of wellness and going on wellness breaks, and there's still that British reserve that needs to be broken down a bit. And I think people get hung up on wellness, particularly when it's relating to spiritualism and all that type of stuff. But I think when we grasp the nettle of what it is, this country is beautiful, and I think it should be a great thing to be using in Visit Britain's campaigns in future years.
Noted.
Sorry, I'm Hayley Beer-Gamage from Experience Oxfordshire and the Tourism Society. All of you in your presentations touched on the importance and power of imagery and memories and using things such as Pinterest. Is there actually any data on the conversion in terms of using imagery or really actively engaging on Pinterest in terms of how that actually converts into bookable, tangible business, rather than it just being one of the nice-to-do things? Because, of course, we all have to be engaged in social media, but as we all know, that is a full-time job and then some now. Are there any data or insights on actual conversion and using things, particularly such as Pinterest, to convert business?
I'll field that, guys don't mind. Off the top of my head, no. There probably are studies. eMarket would be a good resource for some of those things. But I think it's incumbent on us as marketers to design those kind of journeys. And if our business objective for why we're on Pinterest is to generate leads and revenue, then it's up to us to think about how we're going to make that happen. Because Pinterest is a platform like any other. It's a primarily visual platform, but there are plenty of opportunities to engage with people to talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about on that platform. The most important thing to think about, obviously, it's a social network, so it's not just about what you're putting into Pinterest or, for that matter, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and on, but not just about what you're saying, but are you actually engaging people in conversation and actually using the social part of social media, because that's the real benefit for us as marketers. So yes, it's entirely possible to use Pinterest or any other social media in order to build a business and build a brand and generate sales and do all those things. But working out the specific way to do it for your brand might be the challenge. Does that answer your question? Okay. Does anybody disagree? I'm interested. Good.
We have another questioner.
Michael Hurst. Actually, I'm involved in the Buxton development, so I'll be talking to the gentleman from Bath a bit later. Two of the asks within the government's new BTA, British Tourist Authority strategy, are moving people out of London to enrich the regions, and also to spend 40 million on the Discover England Fund. I'd like to ask the panellists how they would move people out of London, and also how they would spend 40 million on discovering England.
Right, you have 40 million.
Yeah.
What are you going to do with it?
We're thinking about it. Yeah, in terms of the moving people out of London, there's no doubt that London is overwhelmingly top of mind for a lot of potential international visitors. So we can't. We've got to be careful in terms of keeping that in their minds, that we can't move too much away from. Don't go to London, because we do want people to come to London. We want them to come to London and lots of the rest of the country as well. So that's very much our plan. Is not to forget about London, but to spread it nicely and evenly around the UK.
Transport?
Transport
It's a
would be
question
nice.
mark,
Yeah.
surely.
Yeah. Marketing that doesn't forget about the rest of the UK as well. Yeah.
Do, Sandy.
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure what the 40 million fund is for, but I think that isn't it to get more organisation in the supply side and sort of products ready for export and promotion. So the idea of, we're not very good at joining up the dots on wellness and so on. There's a germ of an idea, and if you really think that's got legs, then get together with some partners and put a proposition to Visit England, Visit Britain, because I have a feeling that some of that money is for, making sure that products and themes are effectively packaged and marketed across the whole country and not just in pockets.
I mean, how do you engage the small businesses? Going back to the comment of fragmented, how do you engage the small businesses? It seems the pressure now on public-private partnership seems that the big chains.
It's always, it's hard for it has to be through intermediaries, and of course the intermediaries, the interlocutors used to be the regional tourist boards and, then DMOs, but that's quite fragmented because there isn't necessarily coverage, but there is a big reliance on, trade associations and DMOs and others who can aggregate so that a national organisation like Visit Britain or Visit England can deal with an intermediary and not dozens and dozens of individual businesses, or to work with an online travel agency or a lastminute.com or someone who's got the accommodation and so on onto their platform, and then work with them. But I think the more you can group yourselves around areas of common interest or themes and take that as a proposition. I mean, it did happen with the countryside campaign that Visit Britain ran, is that quite a lot of that was led from the not top down, but more bottom up, people pulling together, and the national parks all coming together and saying, well, we can work as one with you and so on.
I mean, Sandy's absolutely right, and another example is the Literature Festival, which can be around the entire country with both big and small destinations and the providers in those destinations taking part. I remember back, I think it was maybe even as far back as a decade, See Britain, which was a festival and exciting acknowledgement of everything we had marine-wise, so you could join in if you were on the river or on the canals or in the ports. It was a really exciting countrywide event, and I think there's going to be a lot more of that. That's what I think Discover England will be much about.
Any final comments, or are we on to new questions, or new questions? Oh, well, so.
Thank you.
You next, Fiona.
CBRE Real Estate Advisory Firm. I sit in the hotels team, and I think it's fair to say that the majority of the investment community at the moment that own hotels are slightly concerned about the introduction of the national living wage, given that it's going to impact a large proportion of workforce, and you're not likely to see the gains on the top line, but you're certainly going to see it coming off the bottom line. I just would like to get your thoughts on how you think it will impact the tourism sector as a whole and how businesses can potentially mitigate.
Question. Anyone want to? None of you are particularly...
Nobody's desperate to get anywhere near that, no.
Are there any hoteliers here tonight? No, they're all... Oh, are you a hotelier?
Martin Evans, the tourism business. I work with quite a few independent hotels. One of them, which has turnover of 1.5 million, feels that it'll put 60 grand immediately on its costs. I think the BHA are campaigning, not necessarily against it, but they're not 100% for it at all. But I think that might be right in the short term, but in the long term it's wrong, because I think the travel industry, and hotels are included, has had a poor reputation as a paying industry, and therefore, to an extent, at the coalface gets the staff it deserves. So in the longer term, I think it'll be a good thing, and it'll put hotels more on a level playing field with other, perhaps, more professional industries, in inverted commas.
Thank you. I don't know about the inverted commas. Fiona, shall we... Any more comments on that? I think that's yes, and then we will... Just very briefly.
I'm from a university in Suffolk, if anybody has heard of Ipswich. We have a gorgeous county, and it's never featured in any of the kind of ratings that you've shown. The wellness, the food tourism, everything else. But because I teach events and tourism, I've got a programme. We're doing a big conference on Suffolk in March, and about how the staycation kind of trend is going to help and support lots of small businesses. But I was just interested because we had a hospitality degree that we actually haven't got anymore. And a lot of the problems for getting placements for students and to get them, to encourage them to get into that trade, was that it felt slightly exploitative at times. So I think there is a real drive that there needs to be some integrity and value in the industry that needs to be, brought out. So anyway, thank you very much.
That's a good point, thank you. And now for something completely different.
Thank you. Fiona Jeffrey, from a perspective of the World Travel and Tourism Council, we're seeing a lot of popular international destinations being impacted by terrorism currently. It strikes me that there's little leadership coming from the travel and tourism industry to help focus and address that for operators within the industry. And we know that the UK is a destination that is subject to threat. And I just wondered what Visit Britain's perspective was in terms of how they can help prepare the industry in difficult times for that sort of situation.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we have monitored is what impact these kinds of atrocities do have on bookings and trips. We find that something like the Paris attacks, for example, it did have an impact in the short term. It does tend to be, for most markets, where it didn't take place, relatively short-lived. So there's a little bit of a drop-off in bookings at first. There are some markets which you do tend to see a bit of a steeper drop-off. Japan is a notoriously nervous market, so we've seen a huge drop-off in bookings from Japan. But for most other markets, it's swiftly returning to normal, unless it's a massive thing like 9/11 or something like that. In terms of how to prepare the industry, you're probably better speaking off to one of my colleagues. So if we catch up later on, I can put you in touch with the right person there.
I think one of the questions that we've asked in this year's holiday trends was actually is focusing in on, you'll see it next month, it's focusing in on the people's perceptions of kind of major international cities as places to go. And we did include, London, Rome, Tokyo, New York, Paris, and Istanbul. And there was, and this fieldwork going to take place last week. So a few months since the past acts, but that fear, I don't know what the exact weighted figure is for Paris, but it is significantly lower than you would ever imagine to be. It's down there at the bottom with Istanbul. And I think, not wanting to perpetuate the fear, but I think there is, the industry should be doing something to better, I suppose, resurrect the tourism potential of these places after tax, because it's almost like the data that we're producing you don't want to get out because it will perpetuate the myth. So we don't know whether we're actually going to publish that yet, because it can be a bit inflammatory to the press. So I think we have to be careful what we're actually saying in terms of people's feelings towards the countries, because it just perpetuates it a bit, and that's a concern.
I think you're right to be wary of the media. I turned down a lot of work recently. After Tunisia, I was asked, I think it was this morning or whatever, to name the 6 safest beaches in the world. Yeah, right. There at the South Bank, I live in Islington, I think we were more at risk than anyone lying on a beach that week. After Paris, BBC and Sky wanted me to name the 5 safest capitals to visit for city break. I refused to. I mean, so I will one day end up saying to the camera, shit happens. I mean, but actually, why wouldn't you be safe going to Paris after that? So I think it's a worry about how you market somewhere afterwards. I mean, the only thing that tour operators will tell you that after something like Tunisia, which was just outrageous, but if it comes back, the prices will be very cheap, and the first people in, because the prices are cheap, will be the Brits.
Yes.
Can I just say, in support of Visit Britain here, there is a special group within Visit Britain, the Tourism Immediate Emergency Response Group, which actually does deal with every terrorist attack or flooding or foot and mouth disease or whatever it is that's disrupting tourism in the UK. It not only provides information to the industry, so Visit Britain is a font of this information, but it also inputs into the government's COBRA discussions as well. So I think there is a mechanism, whether it's enough broadcasted to those that need this information is something that might be looked at. I also attended a seminar on the impacts of terrorism, and there's been quite an upsurge in new destinations where people think that they're slightly more remote or not in the sort of general flow of things, where people sort of suspect there won't be terrorism activity. And of course the point you've made is that there is a price reduction in those destinations that have had terrorism, which usually spawns new tourism flows.
Yes, and again, the outbound industry, I mean, it's early days still for summer holiday bookings, but it does seem to be going back, not for nostalgic reasons, but I think because it's going back to places like Spain and the Balearics in a way that, they were on quite a level pegging for some years with all the so-called new destinations. People are going back there. I don't think it's for nostalgic reasons. Who talked about nostalgia? But it's because it's tried and tested, and so far it's seen as safe. Oh, yes, we have time for more questions. Professor, we'll start with you.
Just to move to back to the marketing issues, take the heat off Richard a little bit. I was interested in you saying that some about the importance of content and content going to drive conversations, and yet also Oliver said that Kieron, sorry,
It's supposed to be Oliver.
Sorry,
Yeah.
that actually, it's organic search is important, and it's difficult to get people to read the content. And there's a little bit of a conflict there, I think. And what was the importance of, really, given the importance of recommendations and word of mouth, what's the balance or the right balance between content that comes from customers or C2C content driven, as opposed to content that comes from either destinations or companies through social media?
Yeah, okay, all right. I'll tell you what, I'll sound off first, shall I? Finding an audience for your content is incredibly important. One of the easiest ways to fail at doing content well is to just create it all and put it somewhere and leave it there and hope that somebody will inevitably find it. It's not Field of Dreams. It is still marketing. And so there is still an opportunity for more paid for, more traditional advertising models to play a role in amplifying that content, helping new audiences find that content and engage with it. And there's certainly still a big part to play for traditional media buying in that process. There are other ways of accessing other audiences. Not just your own, by approaching influencers in your industry, or even working with traditional publishers. They're very open. We have last year we saw native advertising become a big thing, or branded content, or whatever you want to call it. So there are other ways of starting a conversation with content by accessing different audiences. Is that? Yeah,
if I could add to that, just. I don't think there is a conflict. I think, just to clarify my point, the point I made about organic search is not to user-generated content. It's exactly what Sam's saying, which is what you need. The difference is that with user-generated content, it works very well, we find, when you've already got the conversation going. So someone's on your site, let's say, and there's a dialogue going, and they want advocacy, they want to know recommendations, personal things, almost tweaking the message. They like your destination or they like your hotel, and they just want to know, do I stay here or there, or what time of year, etc. Or is the restaurant any good? The bit I was referring to is further upstream, which is how do you get them there in the first place before that conversation starts? Now that is about content, and that's what. So for us, as Sam says, it's absolutely what we do, and many others do now, and I think is the big trend, which is to say, if you have well-curated content, and what I mean by that is well-written, and it is normally by a journalist or someone, but not only that, it's got to be well-handled. I mean, the beauty of digital is that you have to tag it well, you have to basically almost massage it, is my sort of layman's term, to make it very appealing to the search engines. So we spend an inordinate amount of time on SEO, so that every recipe, every destination feature we have is incredibly well ranked, so that if someone looks for said destination or said food type, Spanish food, Spanish recipes, whatever it might be, we rank, and you can do this. I mean, we rank number 1, 2, 3 for a number of different. I'll give you an idea. 181,000 search terms typically in a month are used to find our site, and some are obviously more popular than others. But so you have to do both. Is to answer your question. You have to have really well put together, I'd say professional, in inverted commas again, content which will rank well on Google and so on. Once you've got that person from that, you can then engage in a conversation with user-generated content. But the danger is that people think that user-generated content is somehow going to find an audience. And there are so many blogs out there that are unread. It's a staggering statistic that I think 96% or something is most blogs are never read, or read by less than 10 people. So by all means, once you're on the blog, you can have a lovely conversation back and forth, but you've got to start the conversation. Does that answer the question?
Thank you, Kieron. 2 short questions, perhaps, then we can...
Thank you. Fiona Bewers from the Caravan Club. I'd like to ask the panel what they think the prospects for domestic tourism are in 2016, please.
It's a straightforward enough question. I think we can all answer that.
Yeah. Shall I start? Well, the macroeconomic situation is it's okay. the economy might be a little bit slower than in 2015, but it's still doing not bad. Unemployment is still down. So overall prospects for tourism are pretty good. Coupled perhaps with the weaker pound, that could entice a few more people to stay at home. I mean, my theory is that the overall spending pie for, let's say, British people is very affected by the macroeconomy, but in terms of what the domestic slice of that is much, much harder to predict. But I think the kind of economic and exchange rate situation means I think it's relatively good.
Anyone else want to?
I mean, I think what you're going to see is, I suppose, touches back on that security situation as well. Is there are going to be some increasing prospects for domestic tourism. So we touched on it before. Are there going to be short breaks to Paris, short breaks to Turkey? So I think what you will find is the domestic tourism market will, I suppose, in a way, on a purely personal basis, benefit from some of the macroeconomic trends happening in the wider security, where people are a little bit afraid to go out and people like being a little bit closer to home. So I think in terms of sitting around with, that's probably a nice side effect to perhaps some of what's going on. I don't know if that's what you could call it, but it's certainly a potential.
That was hard to echo that. I have no idea of the figures, but on balance, if you're sort of thinking about it in a slightly making a positive out of a negative, we do have an opportunity surely this year to grow it.
We have an opportunity every year.
Yeah, but particularly, I mean, I think at the moment, particularly so.
Yeah. And there was one more question, and then drinks and nibbles and networking.
Adrian Clark, fully retired tourism professional. A question to Kieron and Max. Do you know what BAFA stands for? It's an organisation which seems to me to be central to the points you've been making this evening. It's the British Arts Festivals Association, and that is another area which can tie in with food, because people, certainly those who support the arts, are great foodies, and it's definitely something that is part of a reason for feeling well.
Definitely.
Totally agree.
Yeah, it's one of my 6 pillars of wellness. On that little slide that I sneaked through, that cultural British arts thing, which everyone's doing, that was my first pillar on the left. I didn't get to show you that chart, but yes, on the case with that.
And interesting in the media at the moment, I can't remember the name of the author who's fed up of turning up as the high point of a festival and not being paid. And all the speakers at festivals. Philip Pullman, thank you. I just throw that in. We haven't time to talk about festivals as an attraction. We do have time, though, to say a very big thank you to our 4 speakers tonight, Richard, Sam, Kieron and Max. Thank you. Thank you too, of course, as always, for our sponsors, without whom there would not be an evening, and to Greg and the team at the Tourism Society for organising this tonight. I think all the speakers are staying. We have until 8 o'clock to network, to pick brains and to discuss the future. And here's to a very successful and happy and safe 2016. Thank you.